Welcome to Slight Reliability, the show where we learn about SRE and observability 1 week at a time. I'm your host, Stephen Townsend. Welcome back to Slight Reliability. I'm Stephen Townsend, and this is the show where we learn about SRE and observability. Today I'm joined by Zach Michael, who is the co-founder of Middleware, which is a full-stack cloud observability platform which leverages OpenTelemetry, right? Right, Zach?
Correct.
Doesn't it?
Yep,
Yes.
that it does.
He was formerly a founding member of the Customer Love Department at Looker, which is a business intelligence platform, which was then acquired by Google Cloud. He then owned customer success strategy for that platform at Google Cloud. He's now working with his co-founder with a vision to simplify and improve the observability space, which is a topic near and dear to my heart. Welcome, Zach. How are you today?
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for the intro. I'm great, man. Nice sunny day in California here on Thursday. Just had a heat wave, so coming out of it, which is nice.
I would ask you what the temperature is, but you'll probably talk in Fahrenheit, and I won't.
I could do it in Celsius. It was 35, around 35, 36, yeah.
We have this thing in the morning at our stand-ups where we do something at the end of stand-up, and it's become looking at the temperature in the different cities we live in. It's not very exciting, and I complain. And
the best small talk you can do is what's the weather like?
but virtually, and we look up a random place in the world, and Baghdad recently, like 46, 47 degrees. Ooh. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's
like 112, 115. It was like that in Northern California, so just north of me a couple hours. Napa, probably, the wine region of California, it was that hot a couple days ago.
That's unnatural. How do people live in that?
Air conditioning, lots of air conditioning.
Today, we're talking about OpenTelemetry, which is something I've spoken about in the past. I haven't used it a lot in my career still, but I know more than I used to. And it's good to check in because it's been quite some time since I've spoken about it. And the first thing which we chatted about a couple of weeks ago that I wanted to pick your brain about further is that in the organization that I work in now, there's a drive to use SaaS products and services wherever possible. The idea is that we don't want to be spending our time looking after infrastructure if we can just get on and deliver value. But from my understanding, moving to a SaaS first model introduces a lot of complexity with observability because you can't necessarily install agents or instrument code at all necessarily. So I guess my first question is, in the SaaS world, are you seeing this as a real challenge for other organizations around the world? And is it a challenge which can be overcome?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is coming up more often and more frequently in my life. And it is a difficult one because inherently with SaaS, you're paying a vendor to manage everything surrounding it. However, you as also probably a SaaS vendor or a software vendor of some sort, you want to be able to link the health and performance of all of your systems together. And that's where telemetry comes in real nicely. However, and you called this out already, in order to collect all that data, you do need to be able to either install something locally, change actual application level code, or a combo of both. There aren't any sort of fancy, outside scrapers that can pick it up because it's all system level data and system level conversation. So it does make it very difficult. There are some tools that have started to build integrations with SaaS vendors. However, that is mostly about importing data from that vendor. And so it brings it into a tool for you to look at, but it doesn't connect it all together, which when we get into the OpenTelemetry side of things, that's the magic, is being able to actually connect signals across components, which makes it very difficult with SaaS.
Wouldn't it be fantastic if the majority of SaaS vendors provided OpenTelemetry standard telemetry as an output that you could just pipe to anywhere you wanted?
That's what I dream about every day. If there were, that's why OpenTelemetry is so nice, because it's a standard framework that's open sourced. So it's very easy for a dev team. I say easy, I'm being a little facetious there, but it's possible for dev teams to take the framework and build an exporter in OpenTelemetry's format. And then any vendor like Middleware, Grafana, any observability tool, they could all take that as an ingest And then yes, that does solve it, right? So that's one of the reasons we invest in OpenTelemetry, because of the standardization and because it's open. So a lot more developers, a lot more companies can adopt it without having to do the song and dance of paying for licensing or becoming a partner or whatever, SaaS vendors like to do nowadays.
So there you go. All the vendors that I work with, please implement OpenTelemetry. You'll make my life so much easier, and you'll actually help our organization move forward and be able to keep track of the increasing complexity of our ecosystem. It's just so hard. I guess the other thing that came to mind is that in a SaaS world, a lot of our effort is building the glue which holds these things together. Is there something that we could do in that glue layer, which I understand we can't install agents or instrument code in a SaaS product, but which could give you the picture somehow? Is there a way that maybe we could architect, or tools that we can use, or patterns we could apply?
There are ways to do it. And we actually have a couple customers who do this. And it's a pretty common practice where you're using some SaaS platform that has an API. And so you have, a service somewhere that's hitting that API and is collecting data points. Then you'd pipe those data points to whatever your local, some centralized processor is or centralized storage, and then ship that to an observability vendor. So we do have customers that do all of that processing on their end, and it does work, and it gets you a version of the view, right? So Grafana is famous for being one of the best dashboarding tools there is for telemetry data and logs. And this is what they won on. They just gave you a very good user interface for visualizing your data, but you had to build all the processors and all the pipeline. So that is probably the best way to solve it. But then what you're missing out on is the connectivity, right? So OpenTelemetry has something called context propagation, and that's where you actually get to see the history or the lineage, I always say, of an event and every single component that's brought into it. So short answer, yes. Long answer, it doesn't really give you everything you probably want.
Yeah. Yeah. Being able to pull in data from multiple sources and provide that unified view is achievable, and is something we are looking to do currently. The bit that's really hard is along the lines of the context propagation, is the distributed tracing part. That's the bit that we really want to get working, but really struggling with it. Uh, we're looking like we're going to have to build our own custom code to munge different logs into trace spans and stuff. It's just a nightmare. I don't know how we're going to end up, but I'll have to do a podcast episode or a blog post to talk about it.
I would love to see that. And if you want help, maybe someone from our team can help, because we look at this all day. But the cool thing about OpenTelemetry is its SDKs are very easy to work with. And so we at Middleware, we've built around OpenTelemetry and on top of it, and we push upstream a lot. However, you could just use OpenTelemetry's supported and out of the box SDKs, and you could do a lot of very custom things with it. So you could, I suppose, find a way to pipe data to some processor and then, as you said, munge it all together. But you could use OpenTelemetry's SDKs to at least apply a standard data model to it. And then that way, when you decide to do something with it in a more broad tool, there are many of us who can accept OpenTelemetry as a data format.
One thing I haven't asked you yet is, what is middleware? I think that will help the next question. So give us the short elevator pitch for middleware. What is it all about?
Yeah, sure. So we're an end-to-end observability platform. We cover everything: metrics, traces, logs, front-end monitoring, which is monikered as real user monitoring. We include synthetics, status page, and alerts. And one of our shining stars is because we use OpenTelemetry and we leverage that context propagation, we're able to take that and add a bunch of indexing and compression and query logic to it that makes the user experience very seamless. So what we are focused on is making the instrumentation very easy, while also making the developer experience for root cause analysis or bottleneck investigation, whatever it may be, make it very easy to connect data points together without having to do custom logic in your code, or build custom logging just so you get the right message at the right time.
Mm-hmm. The OpenTelemetry collector, is that something that you use in your product, or you've extended upon? Extended
upon heavily, and same with OpenTelemetry's SDKs. So a lot of our language support are forks from their SDKs specifically, and then we add additional layers like enriching continuous profiling where we can, or building more functionality just to give developers more, I guess, function to work with their data before it gets to us.
On that note, we did consider talking about continuous profiling.
We did.
Decided not to. If there's anyone out there who's listening to this who knows about continuous profiling, not just the technical details, but how it's actually being used in the real world today, I'd love to have you on the show on that point. But I was going to say before, the OpenTelemetry collector, how much can it do? Like I'm talking about, say, let's say I've got some logs and I want to construct spans out of them. I can't imagine the collector could do that, could it? Is it more about taking existing telemetry signals and filtering them? And
Yeah, so the collector does really well at taking existing telemetry signals, but you can construct completely custom ones. So you could, in a way, build a wrapper for your logs that parses out certain values and constructs a span with it. It is very possible. The thing is then you have to be able to determine when that span ends and close it off. And then how do you connect it to its parent and then build an actual trace end to end? So theoretically, it's possible. And that's one of the beauties of the SDKs is it gives you the functions you need to do a lot of custom work around, for example, what's your span look like? How's it formatted? What type of attributes are passed through? And then you can do custom logic inside of those functions as well.
Internally at the moment, and other organizations I know have implemented this idea of a telemetry gateway.
Yep.
Where every bit of telemetry, it doesn't matter where it comes from, all goes through this, so we can centrally decide what to do with it and how to filter it and strip PII, sensitive data. Is that a good pattern for organizations to use, regardless of the tooling that they are adopting?
It's a very good pattern, and actually so good that we're finding a way to build it into our product. So then that way you don't have to handle all the gateway build, all the load balancing, and all the code on your end, because you can just do it through our UI. But if you are going to use OpenTelemetry, it's actually a good standard practice, because then you can load balance the collectors, right? So you're not overloading one server. And then you basically connect all of those collectors to one gateway. And so then what that ends up doing is it allows you to actually pre-process the data, send it to a gateway that does final processing, right? So the lighter stuff that's more consistent across everything. And then you ship it off to wherever it is you want to view it. You could ship it to S3 for blob storage and then query it through a warehouse like ClickHouse or Pinot. You could ship it directly to Grafana. You could ship it to us, wherever you want. And what it does is it gives you control, and it gives you a little bit of peace of mind knowing that all of your data is going to be processed in a consistent manner. And if you don't like your vendor on the other end, you can just leave them and go somewhere else. And all you're paying for is user training versus a complete overhaul of your software.
Yes, the user training is it's material. Like it's not
very material. It's the hardest part. I would say user training and adoption is the thing that's hardest in our space. Getting the instrumentation up is actually quite easy, relatively. Getting teams to adopt a new way of operating and looking at system level data is very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the collector gateway model that you described, if you wanted to go pure OpenTelemetry, would that just mean essentially the gateway is also a collector, just used for a different purpose?
Yes, it is. It's the same collector contrib, just used in a different purpose. So you basically have collectors passing to a collector, and you're load balancing those smaller collectors to do the heavy lifting, so you don't overload one big server. And then you do some lighter stuff at the final collector just to do like final pruning.
Okay. Craig, who's the observability architect at IAG, hope you listen to this. This is I know you're already thinking about this, but this is great. I'm excited talking about this now. So yeah, that sounds awesome. Okay. On the OpenTelemetry collector and gateway model we just talked about, by doing that, you're decoupling your collection of telemetry from the storage and usage of that data. So in a way, if you just put a collector or a collector gateway pattern in place, that could be seen as a stepping stone to sort of break your dependency on proprietary tools, right? Just that in itself.
Right. Yep.
So you haven't changed anything about the collection, all the tool you're using, you're just putting a thing in the middle, and that's your first step, right?
More or less, yeah. In a very simplified manner, that's very possible. So you've removed, a lot of observability vendors in the past have always been use our agents, use our SDKs. And Datadog was infamous for open sourcing it first, right? And then, we had open tracing come along, and then OpenTelemetry was created. And so now open source is the standard for telemetry data. But prior to that, you have all these big behemoth tools that we compete with that use their proprietary software. And if you want to convert or change, now you're reliant on your new vendor, someone like middleware, being able to either read that data or have a tool that helps you convert whatever it is you're doing into the new way of functioning. So the way to bypass all of that is, yeah, set up your own collector, set up your own gateway. And then when it comes time to store it, you can decide, hey, we want to store it in our own blob storage somewhere, and then maybe find someone who will connect to our blob storage. Or you can find a vendor who does the storage and compute for you, because the storage piece is a big piece. Storing it properly, indexing it, and basically structuring it for efficient queries is a large portion of the deal.
When I was at SquidUp, we talked about that a bit, as well as the idea that all these observability vendors, especially the big ones, they build their own proprietary storage solutions, technologies. And, we wondered why not just use generic storage? Why not just use S3? Why is this not happening more? Is there a good reason, maybe a performance reason, why these tools are doing their own proprietary thing? Or are they just trying to have their own, protect their own market and lock people in?
No, it's definitely the former. It's performance based, because as soon as you're storing in a blob storage, whether it's on Azure or AWS, wherever it is, you are now adding another sort of network step just to request the data. And with near real time series data, especially with how volatile the query parameters are, right? So you have lots of attributes you can filter on, timestamps can change all the way down to the second. And so you really do have a massive amount of data that you end up scanning. And so adding that network step of going to hit a remote storage like an S3 or an Azure just adds latency to your queries. And then you propagate that over thousands of users and, terabytes, sometimes petabytes of data. Then it really slows down. So those proprietary sort of in-house warehouses, they're built with that telemetry or that data framework specifically in mind, like at the core. And so then at the end of the day, okay, for how our data is structured, how we collect it, how we process it, and then store it, this warehouse we've built in-house will be the fastest, hands down. And so that's usually what's driving it. The lock-in side actually doesn't necessarily exist, because a lot of vendors nowadays, their frameworks, or I should say their data formats, are really easy to understand. And so you can convert them with some work, right? So it really does the lock-in though does come with if you want historical, right? So if you're using, just not name blame, but if you're using one of the incumbent vendors and they have their own warehouse, their own ingestion mechanisms, and you switch to middleware, for example, and you say, hey, I want my 60-day history from my past vendor, good luck.
Something else I wanted to check in with is the status of OpenTelemetry logging. Last time I checked, it was probably a year ago, and I was looking into it. The consensus at the time was it's coming. It's not quite, mature yet. It hadn't gone through to GA, I don't think, at that stage. Where is logging at today?
Depends on the language. So it's in GA for a few languages, and then it's still in what they call, I think, dev or beta for most others. When we first started building middleware, we were using FluentD in the most cases, but we've moved to entirely using OTEL logging now in our application level. So, and at our infra agent as well. So everything we do logging based is now OTEL. So I would say it's production ready, because it's actually the thing we have the least amount of problems with, and actually the most flexibility. So we're very happy with it. With OTEL logging over something like FluentD, you get a very nice framework for how to pre-process and post-process logs. So that's very nice. And so it's opened up some new feature capabilities for us.
Just pretend for a second, I don't know what FluentD is.
Oh yeah.
What's FluentD?
Yeah, so FluentD is just another logging processor, right? It's a gateway for collecting and shipping logs.
Which reminds me, I haven't thought about this for a while. Structured versus unstructured logs. Does OpenTelemetry support both?
I actually don't know the answer to that. Everything we support, so if I were to speculate, I believe it's all JSON based, so semi-structured. I think everything through OTEL is JSON formatted. Used to be. I wonder if that's changed. I don't know the answer to that one.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it either. I know that I'm pretty sure we have a lot of unstructured logs still in our org. I wonder if I'll have to look into that one. There's another one for you, Craig, if you're listening.
Yeah, well, and one for me too. Now I'm curious because I know we required everything to be JSON formatted because it plays nicer with OTEL, but I don't know if that's because of we're a fork of OTEL, so we're not always staying up on master. So it's possible that newer OTEL actually can take unstructured.
I guess if you're going native OpenTelemetry and not using middleware or another vendor, you don't have commercial support. What is available out there for in terms of support if you're trying to use it and you're hitting roadblocks or you don't know how to implement something?
Yeah, so OpenTelemetry has an amazing community and it has a lot of contributors from a lot of the major observability vendors. So it's not just a CNCF project, cloud native, cloud compute, cloud native. I don't remember what CNCF stands for. Cloud Native Compute Foundation.
Yeah, that's it.
That's where Kubernetes lives and all these things. So it is a CNCF project, but it also has a massive community of contributors, of experts in the space. And people are very active. And actually, if you open an issue or if you're trying to figure it out, there's tons of articles online on how to get going with OpenTelemetry. And I'll actually say of the open source projects, one of the best I know is MySQL. I hate their docs. OpenTelemetry, amazing docs, right? And so I would say it's a very, very rich community, and it's I wouldn't say easy. You have to learn it, just like any other technology. But once you learn OpenTelemetry, you start flying with it.
If you do want to interact with the community, what's the best way? Is it through the CNCF Slack community, or are there other places you'd go to talk about OpenTelemetry?
So we actually had someone. We ran an OTEL meetup here in San Francisco, and we had someone who is a CNCF sort of developer advocate, really engaged in the community. They work at Honeycomb, and they gave a presentation on this. There are a sleuth of ways to get involved with OpenTelemetry. If you want help, CNCF is a good place. There's an OTEL community itself. I believe there's a Discord, and then there's also the GitHub. So,
Of course.
a lot of places. I could probably get you some links.
Okay, just to finish up, to sort of close this off, OpenTelemetry. What are, we've talked about most of these already, but what are the benefits for an organization who isn't using OpenTelemetry at all today, but for them to move to it?
Yep. So I'd say the number one benefit of OpenTelemetry is the fact that it's a widely adopted framework. So the lack of vendor lock-in. I continue to hear this from clients of mine as well, that being able to move vendors freely is massively valuable. The second thing is being able to process your data in very rich ways. So there's a lot of functions available to you to either manipulate things like logs or traces or spans, to send custom metrics, traces, or logs. And it all stays very connected by the third, which I would call 2B thing, basically, which is context propagation. Right. And so that's sort of the magic sauce, in my opinion, is being able to link all these signals together. So that way, when you are looking at whether it's metrics and you want to find a log, or you're looking at traces and you want to see the metrics from that host, it's very easy to connect all those pieces together. Heavy caveat that you've done the hard work on the data warehousing and the analytics side.
It sounds like, is there any downside? Why is there any benefit at all, for example, for just sticking with monolithic vendor one, that you've been using for the last 5 years?
Yeah, well, and so there's two other really, main sort of collectors out there, or stacks. There's the ELK stack, and then there's sort of the LGTM stack. And those two are what I hear a lot when thinking of, should I go OTEL, LGTM, or ELK? And the downside of OTEL is because it's new, there is a lot of integrations and there are a lot of vendors who have not adopted it yet. And so therefore you will find yourself potentially stranded based on what you're using. So Stephen, to the use case you have, right? A SaaS vendor who has not fully adopted OTEL yet means you can't really get their data out. However, for something like Prometheus and Loki, there's a far wider reaching set of integrations. So that's probably the number one downside. And then the number two is because OTEL is more of a framework with a collector, you do have to do all the setup, right? And so you can just set up OTEL and just automatically collect everything, but that'll become very expensive and very loud and noisy fast. And so you do want to make sure you put in the effort to build your processors and set up your flows. But you'll thank yourself later, because the upfront cost will pay dividends long term for sure.
Thank you so much, Zach, for coming in and chatting about OpenTelemetry with us as the community. You are really well spoken, a very good speaker, I have to say.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you really know your stuff as well. It was great to chat. Anything exciting happening for middleware in the next 3 to 6 months?
So something exciting happened 2 weeks ago. We completely refaced our product. And so we've invested over the last 3 months a ton in UI and UX on this mission to make it simpler to actually understand your telemetry. And then over the next 3 months, we're building out what we're calling our control plane, which is both ingestion controls and pipelining. So you can actually decide all the way down to the granular metric level, or the host level, or the application level, what type of telemetry signals you want to ingest, and then add processing on top of those. So do you want to grok out certain parameters? Do you want to apply attribute level filtering, so that way when your devs build new tools, certain tagged tools don't get ingested at all? And so that's all coming in the next probably 2 to 4 months. And that's gonna be really exciting, because that's gonna help people on the cost side of things, which we didn't talk about at all, but telemetry is expensive.
Oh yeah, that could be a whole nother episode.
Yeah, a whole nother episode on cost, for sure.
Thanks again, Zach, for joining us today, and everyone else out there. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time.
Yep, thank you, Stephen, for having me.